In the interest of full disclosure, this was supposed to be a proper formal first drive review, but such were the conditions at our drive in, I want to say Uday.
Sampur.
Yeah, this month's been hectic. We didn't really get enough time to shoot both the Car Dekho and ZigWheels review. Car Dekho does have a proper review going up. So we decided, had to make a choice. Either we set up the camera, get multiple angles and shoot the car and get something that's going to be not as insightful, or spend more time, actually get insights about the Honda Elevate and sit and discuss it and give you stuff in proper detail. So here we are with option B. That is now the only option, but no need for any suspense. Arun, what is the Honda Elevate?
I'll start with a verdict. In one word, it's unsurprising, right? And that is as straightforward as it can be.
Yeah.
If you want a family car, the Elevate is going to tick all the boxes.
Correct.
It's spacious, it's comfortable, it's got the right amount of features.
Yeah.
God knows it's going to be reliable. So that's that. But you aren't really going to be throwing any superlatives at it. It just gets the job done.
Correct. And I think it's because of this reason that there's a little bit of additional context setting that's needed more so than the usual.
Right.
So yes, this is a rival to the Creta Seltos, Kushaq Taigun, Grand Vitara and Hyryder and the Astor.
Right.
But one of the biggest complaints that we had and the complaints that we saw on the internet was obvious. There is no turbocharged engine option, there is no fancy transmission, there is no hybrid.
There's no diesel.
There's no diesel, very importantly. So the comparison automatically shouldn't be made with those powertrains or those high-end variants where a lot of these powertrains are accessible in the first place. What you need to compare the Honda Elevate to, and what Honda also needs to benchmark it against, is with the bread and butter 1.5 NAs that you get with most options in this segment.
Yeah.
And these are the engines that work absolutely fine for 70-80% of the buying population in this segment. And that is where they should be benchmarking it as well. But what Honda can try and do, and probably will try and do, is offer you more value in that space by doing things like making the petrol auto combination more immediately accessible. I think the one above base variant is going to be available.
It's only the base variant that's just a manual.
Yeah.
All other variants, the V, the VX, the ZX will get a CVT.
Correct.
And as we've seen with the Honda City, Honda is giving you ADAS from one above base.
Yeah.
And that is something we expect with the Elevate as well. But
Correct.
all of this price segment, where does it fit in talk, we can deep dive into later. Let's start with something that's a little more basic. What do you think of the Elevate in the sense of how it looks? Does it appeal to you?
Yeah, I'd say it's simple, elegant, inoffensive, not polarizing, not going to get as contrasting opinions as something like a Hyundai Creta did and still does.
Yeah.
And they've managed to get a very urban-friendly, clean-looking car, not too many cuts, creases, and design lines, and these kind of marketing terms being thrown around as to what line they're using to give character to the car. None of that's happening. But they've got it right in that they've got a boxy-ish SUV design, straight bonnet, flat nose. So it does have that appeal that probably previous Honda SUVs like the CRV, BRV, WRV did not have, because they had like curved fascias. So they didn't have that same kind of appeal. But while it does have elements like the roof rails, 17-inch alloys, 220 millimeters of unleading ground clearance, and all of the body cladding, they haven't gone into that outright rugged SUV direction still. I wouldn't give it that sort of labeling. It is still decidedly urban and very friendly looking car.
I have to agree with you, and I'm glad that Honda's moved away from designing their SUVs like outright crossovers, right? It is more SUV in that sense. Honda has also played it safe, and I'm glad they have. In fact, even if you look at the color palette, right, it's very neutral, it's very family friendly, it's very Honda, all very goody silvers, grays, browns. There are a couple of interesting colors. There's a red, there's a deep blue which I really like, and there's that orange dual tone that you'll see in a lot of the B-rolls. So overall design definitely a highlight for me with the Elevate, and something that genuinely stands out, at least for now. It's got great road presence as well.
Especially with the LED lighting that they've used. They've got a distinctive LED signature at the back, all LED headlights, the lighting for the indicators and DRLs also, there's those interchangeable type all LED. But I think more so than what the design is, one thing that's going to seal the deal for a lot of people is not something traditionally that you'd expect. The driving position. Right? Every single time you must have seen in any auto review when we sit that commanding driving position. But trust me, the way that they've executed it with the Elevate is almost Land Cruiser like, because I remember sitting at the Auto Expo in the LC300.
Yeah.
And I was like, does this car ever end? There's just endless bonnet in front of me because of the kind of haunches that they have. And obviously those power domes like finish on the bonnet, they do help the exterior look more aggressive. But from behind the wheel, it just looks so cool. It looks so muscular. And functionally also it does work for people who like to know where the edges of the car are. It just helps them get a better sense of judgment, and I feel like this can be a big deal closer for a lot of people.
For me, that particular driving position, why that sense of having a commanding view is just amplified. It's because the bonnet is straight and flat.
Yeah.
If you look at the Grand Vitara, if you look at the Seltos, right, all of these, the bonnet kind of slopes away from you. This one's right up there, and you can see a bit of the muscled out fender.
Correct.
So it's a great driving position. Speaking of the driving position and the front seat, Mr. 6'5", any comments on what the front seat experience was for you in terms of space?
Okay, I think it's important for me to give two contexts here, two perspectives rather, because obviously as a former Honda Jazz owner, I was looking at the Elevate to be my immediate upgrade within the Honda family, as it were. Obviously, I've bought a Grand Vitara now. So, in that perspective, I am much happier in the Grand Vitara as someone of my size, because the driving position and, well, the platform, let's begin with that, right? It's shared with the Honda City, which means that even with the jacked up ground clearance and the taller roof line, the seating position doesn't go as low as someone of my height would have liked. So the end result is that when I'm seated with the seat set all the way down, I still do wish that I had additional headroom. And also I would have liked the gap between the floor and the seat to be more, so that my legs were slightly more downward swooping and I was getting not only that commanding driving position, but a greater deal of comfort as someone of my height and size.
Yeah.
But if I look at it from the perspective of someone who's up to 6 feet tall, whereabouts, they will definitely be comfortable in this. The floor box is nice and accommodating. The seats are large. The driving position, like we said before, is very commanding. Your knees don't land up fouling with the center console as much, at least on the driver's side.
Yeah, so you mentioned someone roughly 6 foot tall, that's me. I'm more than comfortable in the front seat. I prefer seating lower than usual for most, but I'm comfortable there. One pain point, should I call it a pain point? I think let's term it as an irritant. On the co-driver's side, so where the wireless charger enclosure ends,
Center
where the glove
console,
box
basically.
starts, that bit of the center console kind of juts out. So it will foul with the co-driver's knee. I think
I can't sit in the front seat. Even with the seat pulled all the way back in the co-driver seat, I simply cannot manage it. I had to tuck my right knee underneath my left leg.
Right. So for someone like me, I would have to push the co-driver seat a notch or two further back.
Yeah.
But that's not really a problem for the rear seat occupants.
Oh yeah.
Because there's just so much space in the Elevate that front seat thoda piche hua not really a problem. Because I'll give you context. Mr. 6'5", Mr. 6 foot almost, and I have an iPhone worth of knee room before my knee hits the front seat. And if the front seat is set for a 6 footer, there's loads of space.
In fact, even with me sitting in my driving position, I still can sit behind my own seat.
Yeah.
Maybe with this much knee room to spare, but it's still manageable. And while there is an issue of tall person centric headroom in the front row, specifically at least with the sunroof equipped variants, nothing of the sort in the rear seat, because they've scooped out the roof line so well that even with my head resting on that headrest, I still have something to spare. So if you're tall or if you wear headgear, that is going to be a plus, especially if you're going to be a chauffeur driven owner. And that is something that they've got quite right with the rear seat experience. It is still spacious, practical, very roomy, very airy. And a little thing that I like is that at the global premiere of the Elevate, we noticed that it had the same armrest issue as the Honda City.
Yeah, just slumped down.
Slumped onto the seat base, and they have corrected that. So now the seating position in the rear seat is a lot more natural, a lot more comfortable. But do you think they could have done more for rear seat occupants, considering how competent it is?
They could have. I want to build upon the bit that you mentioned about headroom first, right? Headroom's great. What they've done is they've scooped out the side of the headliner, right? So if you're trying to squeeze 3 in and you have to kind of scoot to the side and sit, you're not really going to be banging your head against the door frame, right? So that's very important. But it's not really a 3-seater. 3 adults, especially someone my size, impossible. 2 hatta-katta adults, 1 child, very easily possible.
Yeah.
And if this is the use case, then you are not really going to miss the central headrest or the 3-point seat belt, although I still maintain it should have been on offer.
Especially since the Honda City gets it.
Gets it. Second, because there's just so much space, right? I see people buying this instead of the City to be chauffeur driven around,
Yeah.
right? And if that's the case, I think I would have liked Type-C or just USB chargers at the rear. I don't know why there's a 12-volt socket there. No one really goes out and buys those anymore.
Or just a 12-volt socket.
Yeah. And I think it could do with rear sunshades.
Yeah.
So that's as far as the occupants are concerned, the rear occupants are concerned. But what all occupants are likely to appreciate at all points is the quality. It is genuinely a standout with the Elevate, and I love that they've carried that on from the Honda City because it's genuinely a strength that the City has. And there's attention to detail as well, right?
Yeah.
So the plastic that they've used on the top of the dash, on the top of the door pads, grade A stuff. There's leatherette that they've used on the IP. There's a wooden insert there. And this leatherette kind of spills over onto the door pad, not only at the front, but at the rear as well, right? So you will appreciate the soft touch materials, but it is the attention to detail that gets me excited. A lot of manufacturers use chrome to highlight the AC vents. Honda said, no, we'll do dark grey. And that same dark grey is used in the stitching of the seats as well.
Basically, it's not just a good experience, space, practicality, and touch and feel wise, but it's also a cabin that will age well because this is a design that is universally likable. I do find it gives me old Mercedes-Benz vibes in a way.
It does, and that tan black color combination is
Brilliant.
Right?
But we have to now talk about the sort of elephant in the room, which is the features list.
Right.
On the one hand, let's discuss what features it does get.
Okay.
And what we like about it, right? First of all, that 7-inch part digital instrument cluster.
Too good.
What's your take on that?
Unpopular opinion might just become popular opinion. It is the best instrument cluster in the segment if I discount the Seltos because it has the new 10.25 inch.
Right.
That's limited to the top end. I love the way digital meets analog.
Beautiful.
It's too good. The way it does a little dance on the startup, you can switch between tachometer, you can get the G-force reading there, all the ADAS control, all the ADAS readouts rather, very crisp, very to the point, and just great graphics also, very easy to use also.
Correct. And along with that familiar cluster that you do see with the City, it's got a new 10.25 inch touchscreen infotainment system that does support wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. I think the system is definitely a significant step up compared to what Honda's been generally offering with a lot of their cars because both Honda and Toyota have this tendency to offer systems that look a bit aftermarket. That's not the case here. It does feel purpose-built for the Elevate. In fact, when you boot it up, it has that custom Elevate sketch and face of the Elevate coming to life and it just looks so nice. And I do appreciate that. One sort of gripe is not so much with the user interface or the responsiveness of it. You know, it's quite well executed. Some of the icons are just a little bit too small for my liking. That could become a bit of a hindrance.
With the infotainment, the home screen is basically all the screen you have, right? So, so you're used to, like, for example, with Hyundais or Kias, you have sub menus where you can play around. Here you just get a drop down. It's very easily accessible. Even to use on the move, it's going to be very, very simple. But when you look at it as is, you feel like the real estate is not really used all that well, but you switch to Apple CarPlay and when you see your full, when you see full screen maps, when you see the entire 10.25 inches of screen space being utilized, that is when you realize that, hey, this is a good screen. And if I have to compare it to the City The City has this weird matte finish on the screen at all times. This has crisp graphics. It's got great response time, right? And this makes me want a slightly better music system.
Yeah, because Hondas generally with their OEM setups itself, even if it's not branded, they do give really good sound quality. This one's running an 8-speaker sound system. It's decent but a little bit flat, especially if you're seated in the rear. So that is one place that they could have offered some improvement. But by and large, I don't see it being a reason for complaint. Unless you're a serious audiophile, you won't really feel the need for an upgrade. And besides that, you've got push button start, smart keyless entry. You've also got the remote start option on the key itself. The auto AC along with rear AC vents, and the air conditioning system, as we experienced, is quite strong.
Air
Like even on a
conditioning
very
is
hot
phenomenal.
day.
Yeah.
So we love that. Electric sunroof, yes. Panoramic sunroof, no. It is going to be a miss for some. Other people in the comments are going to start arguing that you don't need a sunroof. If you need it, you don't need panoramic. So I'll leave that up to personal judgment. If you want it, you want. If you don't, you don't. That's fair enough. Now we have to get into the feature misses. Because how much of it is valid, how much of it is actually need-based, want-based, where's that debate go?
Okay, for me, what the Elevate misses, none of it you need. A few here and there might make your experience a little richer. It's going to take it from 95 to 98. It's never going to be the full 100. But you can very easily live without it, right? So the misses. Front seat ventilation.
Yeah, that's a miss in my books.
That's a miss purely because we live in such a hot country.
Yeah.
It's just a boon to have ventilated seats. It does not have a 360-degree camera. It's got one camera on the left wing mirror, lane watch as Honda calls it.
Along with the rear camera, of course.
Yeah. Integration is so-so.
I'd say that with the lane watch camera and the rear camera, both the issue is sort of similar. The resolution of the rear camera is better than what Volkswagen or Skoda offer, definitely, but not as good as it is in the Grand Vitara or Kia Seltos or Creta. And 360-degree camera, okay, fine, it would be nice. The lane watch camera is very useful in very select circumstances, specifically daylight, clear light. If it's monsoon, fog or night, that camera is honestly not dependable enough.
So when you're indicating left, the lane watch feed overrides absolutely everything else on the instrument touch screen. So if there is an important navigation update you need to see or anything else, you're going to miss it purely because it will show you the camera feed.
Yeah.
Right. So that I think could have been integrated better. Panoramic sunroof, I don't really miss. I think a sunroof is good enough. Now I really want to set context with respect to ADAS because
and safety in general also.
And safety in general. So I think what's important to note is yes, Honda is doing good by democratizing ADAS, so as to speak. They did that with the City. ADAS is available in 3 variants out of 4. I expect the same with the Elevate as well. No reason for them to not do it. But one very important point of differentiation here, say for something versus the Seltos or the Astor.
Or even the Hyundai Verna.
Or even the Hyundai Verna for that matter. All of these cars technically have level 2 ADAS, but there's a very core difference in their functioning.
Yeah,
right?
camera versus camera plus radar, basically.
Right. So the Seltos, Astor, they've got radars in the front bumper and in the rear as well. The Elevate just has a front-facing camera, right? So what it does get is crucial.
Yeah.
Adaptive cruise controls there. Auto emergency braking is there. Lane keep assist is there. We'll break this down in just a bit. But what's missing because the radar is not there, right? The 2 things you will compromise on. Firstly, if there's low visibility, if there's rain or fog, or even if it's night time, we've experienced this with the City Hybrid and the City Facelift, the system is not that reliable as radar, right? Second bit, because there are no radars at the rear, you miss out on blind spot monitoring, you miss out on rear cross traffic alert, possibly ADAS features that are more in need for Indian driving conditions
Correct.
than adaptive cruise control.
Or specifically, yeah, like adaptive cruise control does become something that comes into play more often on the highways. But considering this is going to be a car that's primarily going to be in the city, so with that blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert being missed out on, these are two features that will come into play more often than something like adaptive cruise control
Right.
or lane keeping aid, especially in a city centric car like the Elevate. And that aside, then we have to talk about the execution of what ADAS features you do have, because you do have adaptive cruise control, AEB, lane keeping assist, and road departure mitigation. Now, we briefly tested out all of these systems, and I feel like the benchmark has sort of been set high by cars like the Verna or even the Kia Seltos. You would know better about the Seltos,
Yeah.
because you've experienced it. But like, if we talk about adaptive cruise control, the minimum distance it will set even at the lowest setting is going to be of 2 elevates, essentially.
yeah.
So it does feel a little bit jerky if a third car enters in between you and the car you're following. So that can become a little bit tricky to get used to. Then lane keeping aid. In cars like the Verna specifically, the system dials in minor inputs constantly to make sure you're in the center of the lane.
Correct.
In something like this, what will happen is it will detect the lane, but it will give you corrective inputs after you've crossed over, I think.
Very slightly,
Yeah.
but yeah, it again I can draw a parallel to say how the XUV 700's ADAS works, right? So while you hit the white line that divides the lane, it will pull you back in lane.
Yeah.
The Elevate will wait for you to go slightly out of lane and then say pull
Corrective
back.
input. So it's not as organically effective as some other cars in the segment do have to offer. But on the safety front, you do have 6 airbags, you've got VSC, ABS with EBD, ISOFIX, all of those features have been brought in. And obviously, Honda has also sort of indicated that the crash worthiness of this car is going to be quite strong as per their internal tests.
Yeah, there is this layer of assumed safety, right?
Yeah.
Because the Elevate is based on the city's platform. The city has scored a full 5-star in the ASEAN NCAP. So there is this layer of assumed safety, right? The Elevate is based on the city's platform. The city scored a full 5-star in the ASEAN NCAP. So you can expect a similar rating from the Elevate.
Yeah, there is some amount of trust that you can put into that. And I think the next bit that comes in with the Elevate is the drive and
No, it's not. Before we go on to how it drives, because this is such a big highlight, I want to cover it first.
Boot space.
The boot space. Reference. The Elevate has 458 liters of space, and my God, you can use pretty much all of it.
yeah, we put what, 6 trolley bags in?
6 trolley bags.
Body big.
Yeah, and there's just so much room. You get 60-40 split seats. You can fold the seats away. It's not entirely flat, but it's pretty usable. Easily the best boot in the segment by far. And other than that, in-cabin practicality is also pretty sorted, as you would expect a Honda to do. Now, on to what you also expect Honda to do, 1.5 liter IV tech.
So no surprises with this engine either. Obviously, it's a very city-centric engine, city-centric. Okay. It's got very smooth performance, great refinement, it's reliable, it's time-tested, it's bulletproof. So it will just work. It is perfectly in line with our expectation of what a lot of people want from their car. Hai ki gaadi hai, chal jayegi. It is a car, it will drive. That is what this engine is perfectly capable of. It delivers power very smoothly. If you're a chauffeur-driven owner, this is the kind of engine you will like, because the power delivery is so linear. It makes the drive experience so much more predictable and smooth also. But it does have the same gaps, because it does make most of its power in that 4,000 to 6,000 RPM range.
Yeah.
So if you're driving up on inclines, especially with load, or if you're driving out on the highway and you want to make an overtake going from 65 to 90 kilometers per hour, you will need to push the engine with the CVT or give it a downshift sometimes too. Like going down from 6th to 3rd can become something of a situation where you're driving on roads like the climb up from Mumbai towards Pune, where you have to cross Lonavala.
Right.
So filtering through the trucker traffic and all, you will have to push this engine, and that is common nature with all the other NA 1.5s in this segment as well.
It is. And so what Tushar is saying is, if you see an Elevate being driven hard, it might be out of necessity than the driver wanting to have fun. Between the manual and the CVT, if you can stretch to the CVT all day, every day by the CVT, because it does a wonderful job of masking the
gaps in performance with the engine itself, because you don't have to work the gearbox as much as you would like with the manual. The manual is fun, it's smooth to use, very engaging, but again, it's not an enthusiast-centric car to begin with.
Right.
So you're not going to get that much of that manual transmission fun to begin with. And one small point of observation there is that the clutch's bite point is quite high up and the clutch's travel is quite long, even though the clutch is light.
Yeah, but it's something that you can
Adapt
tailor. Oh, also tailor, right? Say you want a slightly lower bite point, that is something that you can tailor. But in case of the CVT, again, it does not like being hurried, it does not like being hustled. You drive with a light foot, you drive aram se, and you're going to enjoy the experience. If you drive it hard, it does try to mimic a torque converter where it will shift up the gears.
You have paddle shifters too.
Yeah, it will give you that sensation of going through the gears, so as to speak. But I genuinely enjoyed driving the Elevate with a light foot, very relaxed. And it is when you drive like this, do you also get to enjoy that nice, comfortable, cushy ride?
Ride quality, yeah. So, as you'd expect, very comfort set, manages bad roads, potholes, nice and well, managed to control side-to-side tossing also a fair bit better than something
That is a huge
like a
issue
Grand Vitara.
in the Seltos, in the Grand Vitara, in the Kushaq Taigun. If you go really slow over craters, which is most metros because of the rains right now, you're just tossing about side to side. With the Elevate, no, it will hop over it nicely.
So, yeah, I mean, city-centric behavior is good. Once you get out onto the highway, front row or rear row, if you're driving at 85, 100 kilometers per hour.
Stability is great.
So, it's not compromising that cushy ride by giving you something that's too soft or bouncy as a side effect. So, they've managed to get that balance bang on. And obviously, if you're coming to that engine point, one thing that we should note is that if you do want an Elevate package, but with something more punchy performance being on offer, the Elevate EV is going to be on its way by 2026.
Yeah, in fact, the need for a slightly punchier, slightly more fun Elevate is felt only when you're going out attacking corners.
Yeah.
Right, because very much like the Honda City, the Elevate feels so predictable in the way it steers, in the way the body moves around. You want a little more power, and all of that power is going to be electric power within 3 years, as Honda's promised. And all of that torque is going to be instant, which means we are going to be giggling very, very soon. So that's the long and short of the Honda Elevate.
But I think now let's give it a sort of a verdict with a couple of perspectives, right? The number one question is this an upgrade to Honda City?
I think it's a parallel.
Exactly, because so much the packaging being offered with both these cars is very similar. And there is a very large faction of buyers that will have one car, sell it and buy the same car again. It happens especially with cars like the Honda City or the Toyota Innova for that matter.
Yeah.
So if you do own a City and you're one of those kind of upgrade takers where it's a sort of gentle shift, this will give you something that's giving you a little bit more of a flavor change because of the kind of design, obviously the seating position, the ride height increase, all of those variables will feed into it because it's still a safe bet, but it's a good enough change that you're not going to be compromising or feeling like I'm getting the same experience all over again.
Yeah.
But it's not an upgrade in the traditional sense because you're not getting some kind of boost up with performance or behavior or importantly features either. Then the question becomes, where does it sit in the segment itself? And that is where the pricing becomes the key part, because I feel the Elevate has two things to do. One, become an alternative to people who are buying the top end variants of sub 4 meter SUVs like the Venue, Sonnet, Tata
because
Nexon.
God knows they've become too expensive now.
They have. I think the Sonnet is hitting 17 lakh on
17
road.
lakh right now, yeah.
So in that space, if you want a car that is larger in size and you're okay with getting a slight performance compromise, maybe cutting down a few features, you can look at maybe a mid-range Elevate as an alternative. And then again, with that context of its direct segment rivals like the Seltos or Creta or Grand Vitara or that long list, they have to get the pricing key, because yes, we have decided that the pricing cannot be compared to the turbo petrols or hybrids, but Honda, it's important that you do that too.
Yeah.
Because we have seen that Honda does seem to demand a slight price premium.
Yeah.
And that's within reason, it's still acceptable. But by what we've had in terms of discussions with Honda and certain whispers that we've heard, we are looking at a price range of I think 12 to 17-ish lakh ex-showroom. So basically, a fully loaded Honda Elevate with ADAS should be available on road in the ballpark of rupees 20 lakh.
So that's that. The Elevate's strength will lie in its space, comfort, and quality.
Yeah.
And if that is something you want in your next family car, the Elevate should be on your radar. And that's pretty much it for this episode of ZigAnalysis.
Yep, 3 things to sign off. Number 1, if you agree, disagree, let us know in the comment section. Give us your perspective nevertheless. September is when the prices for the Elevate will be announced. Like, share, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram. Bye-bye.
Bye.